Will Rogers, American. Yes, he was probably the most popular and beloved American of his day. He is lost to us now, but his keen humor, his kindly philosophy, and heartwarming presence will never be lost. In his boyhood, when he first resolved never to capitalize on his father's position, the rope had taken Will around the world as a rodeo performer. It was to take Betty and Will farther than either dreamed. Rogers was always roping. These are some of the earliest slow-motion pictures. The scenes are from The Ropin' Fool, a film he himself produced to preserve a picture record of his tricks. It was made, he said, to show you young ropers what I could do when I was your age. Even in his later years, Will Rogers could rope and tie a goat in 8 seconds. Catch the rider by the waist without going over his head. A perfect rollback. After the ocean wave and a Texas skip, a clean, straight roll into a 4-foot catch. He makes this one right on the nose. Out to the end of a 50-foot rope. Now the rope goes out behind the horse and rolls all the way around to catch the forefeet from the opposite side. It's a figure 8. Notice the rope cross as the horse steps into it. Then precise timing for a perfect catch. Another variation of the figure 8, getting both horse and rider. It's seldom seen today. One hand throwing 2 ropes in 2 places. That's accuracy. Now 3 ropes, 2 for the horse and 1 for the rider. Yes, Will Rogers was undoubtedly the world's greatest roper. In his early vaudeville act, he never spoke at all. But later in New York, he began to describe his tricks. The audience laughed. Will expanded his remarks, and in no time he was making penetrating comments on topics of the day. This immediately took him into musical comedy. And here he is on the roof of Ziegfeld's New Amsterdam Theater, high above New York's 42nd Street. These are early pictures of his costume and act. But the boy from Ulaga little realized that he was just at the start of his career. Now it's the Ziegfeld Follies. He's still twirling that loop. But the rope and the familiar chewing gum have become only a background for his witty comments on timely topics. By 1918, the man with the magic rope had been claimed by Hollywood to make silent pictures. The family moved to California. He built a roping corral. That rope was still writing the story. As a motion picture star, he held all box office records for 1933. He was tops in radio. His charity performances innumerable. His benefit tours raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for relief during the depths of the Depression. But he was perhaps best known for his newspaper column, Will Rogers Remarks, which appeared on the front page of over 500 papers. It was the most widely read daily column in all history. A pungent paragraph of homely comment and penetrating wit. To gather information for this column, he flew all over the world. He was commercial aviation's biggest booster. In 1931, he happened to be in earthquake-stricken Nicaragua and quickly offered his help.
The 24th, and the committee has decided to come down and give you a hearty welcome and invite you to be here during those days.
I'll come down.
I hope to see you here at that time.
You better not invite me if you don't want me.
In tribute to his services, 5 Nicaraguan Will Rogers stamps were printed. A circumstance doubly remarkable because the series honored both an American and a private citizen. Whenever possible, he took Mrs. Rogers with him on his adventurous jaunts across the world. Arriving in New York from Europe, he described one air journey.
I had a 10,000-mile flight from Penang, right above Singapore, clear into London, or clear to Paris on one plane. I was 11 days on one plane. I had a wonderful trip, you know. And Miss Rogers flew with me. We flew over to Paris and London around. She'd make little flights, but no big ones. Well, listen, and Mr. Hoover, now listen, don't let him knock Mr. Hoover too much. Just let him go see some of these other countries and come back. He looks good after you've been over there, brother.
But good as America looked, there was a depression, and Will Rogers was deeply disturbed by such want in the midst of plenty.
There's not a product that you can name that we haven't got more of it than any country ever had in the face of the earth. And yet we've got people starving. We'll hold the distinction of being the only nation in the history of the world that ever went to the poorhouse in an automobile.
This was the opening of a national drive for unemployment relief, made when transcontinental broadcasts were so rare the newsreels photographed them. Note he uses no script.
I know that this subject is very dear to Mr. Hoover's heart. I know that he'd rather see the problem of unemployment solved than he would to see all the other problems he has before him combined. And if every town and every city will get out and raise their quota, what they need for this winter, why, it'll make him a very happy man. And happiness hasn't been a steady diet with our president. I thank you. Good night.
When Franklin D. Roosevelt campaigned in California in 1932, he was introduced to a vast audience in typical Rogers style.
Governor, this wonderful crowd is due to your drawing power. You're the biggest thing that's been in this stadium since Babe Dietrichson. We must have some 80 or 90,000 people here tonight. That's the most people that ever paid to see a politician.
Now, this introduction hasn't been very flowery, but remember, you're only a candidate. As the president, I'll do right by you.
After Roosevelt's election, Rogers made a trip around the world. Interviewed by Japanese reporters, his words were strangely prophetic.
Mr. Roosevelt told me when I come over here, he says, "Now, Will, don't you go over there and jump on Japan. You just keep them from jumping on us."
Rogers was one of the few who firmly backed General Billy Mitchell's losing fight for a strong American Air Force. Here the two men are after a flight together. Rogers said bluntly that for the next war, America had better learn to fly or learn to dig. Rogers and Mitchell, two great champions of American aviation.
But kind of gather from you that you doubt I was born. Of course, out in our country, if you walk up and appear before anybody in person, why, we take it as fairly positive proof that you must have been born. We just kind of trust in that way.
But it seems strange that you have no official record.
Well, it's not strange. Yes, so far to town, I guess them old-timers, by the time they went to town to get a birth certificate, you could raise another child.
But you are an American citizen.
Well, I think I am. Folks, Indian, both my mother and father had Cherokee blood in them. Was born and raised in Indian Territory. Of course, I'm not these Americans whose ancestors come over on the Mayflower, but we met them at the boat when they landed. And it's always been to the everlasting discredit of the Indian race that we ever let them land. It was. That's the only thing I ever blamed Indians for. The biggest bonehead they ever called is with Indians.
Today, the Santa Monica Ranch he so greatly loved has been transformed into another Will Rogers memorial. Here are the earthly treasures he cherished. Among them, a statue of Will on horseback, typically lifelike. That twirling rope has spun out its destiny. But Will Rogers, motion picture star, philosopher, newspaper columnist, has left an immortal heritage. But of all things, he wanted to be best remembered for his famous line, which summed up his life: "I never met a man I didn't like."